Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting this evening's program. Shall we please be on our feet as the speakers and the chair take the high table? I humbly ask that we put our mobile phones on silent. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. President of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, past presidents of the Academy, vice presidents of the Academy, fellows of the Academy, distinguished speakers, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of fellows of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, Ghana's premier learned society, I warmly welcome you all to day 2 of this year's 3-day public forum. This event is being streamed live on the Academy's Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook platforms. Please allow me to recount the reason for our gathering here. Every year, the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences convenes a 3-day public forum that provides an opportunity for academics, policymakers, practitioners, and the public to deliberate on a topic of national importance. The maiden public forum was held in June 1993 as a collaboration between the Academy and the Frederick Ebert Foundation. It was on the theme, Making Democracy Work in the Fourth Republic. 20 years thereafter, in 2013, the public forum became exclusively an academy event, organized with support from organizations such as MTN, the Bank of Ghana, UNB, and the NPA. Over the years, the forum has been held on different themes, including accountability in governance, genetically modified organisms, waste management, migration and development, sustainable development goals and national development, vaccines, and African continental free trade area, challenges and prospects. Today, after 3 decades of the public forum, we have returned to the subject of our maiden edition, that is, how to make democracy work in this country. This year's theme is National Elections in Ghana, Issues and Prospects. No doubt, this is a topical issue, especially considering that we are headed for the polls in just a few months. By delving into these issues at this forum, we can gain a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. We have invited a distinguished panel of experts to share their insights on various aspects of the theme. I have no doubt that our speakers, who will be introduced to you shortly, will do justice to their topics and make your time here with us this evening worthwhile. This year, we are delighted to announce that we have received support from the Bank of Ghana and the National Petroleum Authority, NPA, to organize this event. We thank them very much for their support. It is now my singular honor to introduce to you the chairperson for this evening's session. She is Emerita Professor Isabella Achimba Kwachi. Emerita Professor Kwachi is the Vice President of the Sciences section of this academy and a member of the Council of the Academy. She is a professor of immunology and parasitology, University of Ghana. Her groundbreaking research on malaria immunity and vaccine development at the National Institute of Health and New York University in the USA in the 1980s led to the very first approved human malaria vaccine, RTSS. Don't ask me about it. Ask her when she comes up. She is a fellow of the African Academy of Sciences, the first emerita professor in the sciences at the University of Ghana. Emerita Professor Kwachi established the immunology unit at the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research from 1980 to 1983. She was the first female director of the University of Ghana School of Public Health and the foundation dean of the School of Public Health, which also makes her the first female dean in the College of Health Sciences at the University of Ghana. She served in this capacity from 2002 to 2007. Emerita Kwachi earned numerous awards and recognitions, including UNESCO Chair for Women in Science and Technology in the West Africa region, and the 2014 Laureate African Union Kwame Nkrumah Award for Women in Science. She was the 2019 Laureate for the Clara Southmaid Ladlow Award by the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. Women's World Day 2021 recognized Emerita Professor Kwachi as one of 7 women in science who have changed our world for the better. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our chairperson, Professor Kwachi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorary Secretary, for the kind words. President of the Academy, past presidents of the Academy, Vice President of the Academy, Fellows of the Academy, distinguished guests, students, media, all protocols observed. Good evening. We've come to day 2 of our Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences Public Forum. And as the Honorary Secretary just informed us, our main theme was on national elections in Ghana, issues and prospects. Yesterday, we were treated to an amazing, thought-provoking lecture. The topic was regulating campaign finances for national, yesterday was an amazing session. But today, our sub-theme is on financing elections, day 2, financing elections. Now, the fora was going to be a little different. It was going to be a symposium, and we have 2 topics. The 2 topics are regulating campaign finances for national elections, a comparative perspective. And then the second is making political parties solvent, issues and opportunities. And we had 4 speakers, and we were going to deal with 1 topic, discussion, symposium discussion, and a second. 1 speaker has been hospitalized and another cannot come. So we are left with just 2 speakers. So we are being innovative. So each speaker will speak. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our amazing speakers who have agreed to talk to us, even though we're missing 2. But they've kindly agreed to their new format. So the new format is that our 2 speakers, I will introduce them at the same, one after the other, and then they'll make their presentations for the first topic and second topics, and then we'll open the forum for discussions of both, because they're both related subjects, actually. So this is a format, a changed format. So now let me go ahead and introduce our 2 wonderful speakers. And the first speaker will be Mr. William Nyarko, and the second speaker will be, who was here with us yesterday, Mr. Peter Manu. So Mr. William Nyarko is the Executive Director of the Africa Center for International Law and Accountability. He specializes in democratic governance, human rights, public international law, and anti-corruption. In 2021, he led a CDD Ghana study on understanding how illicit money fuels campaigning financing in Ghana. And in 2023, he co-authored a report titled Money and Elections, Perspectives from Members of Parliament in Zambia for the National Democratic Institute in Zambia and the Transparency International in Zambia. He has spoken on political parties financing and campaign financing in Uganda, Zambia, and Ghana. Mr. William Nyarko holds a Master of Laws in International and Comparative Law from the George Washington University Law School in the USA, a Master of Public Policy from the George Mason University, also from the USA, and a Bachelor of Laws from Nottingham-Trent University in the UK. Now, our second speaker is Mr. Peter Manu, who is an international consultant on center-right political party organization and management, as well as a campaign manager and election strategist. He served as Western Region Chairman of the NPP for 2 terms, from 1998 to 2006, and then served as National Chairman from 2006 to 2010. He is currently the Vice Chairman of the Munich-based International Democratic Union. Now, in 2016 general elections, Mr. Manu managed Ghana's NPP national campaign to victory. And in the 2020 general elections, he again led the NPP campaign term to another victory. He has represented the NPP on the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, that's IPAC, of the Electoral Commission of Ghana from 2005 to date. He also attended several workshops across the globe, including in Nigeria, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, Mozambique, Malawi, the United Kingdom, Germany, and the USA, all as a resource person on multi-party democracy in Africa, political party organization and management, and election and campaign strategies. Also, women, youth, minorities, all of these, their involvement in politics, among others. He is an international observer of elections and has observed in, again, Nigeria, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Uganda, Liberia, United Kingdom, Norway, Sweden, Germany, etc. So, audience, I give you 2 excellent speakers, and I'll first call on Mr. Nyarko to make a presentation on the first topic of the day, that's regulating campaign financing for national elections and comparative perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kwache, for the warm introduction. Those credentials that you mentioned have certainly raised a marking scheme and higher expectation. I'll do my best. I also want to thank the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences for the invitation. It means a lot to me, and I say this not on a light note, because back in the late 1990s, I used to be a journalist at the Ghanaian Chronicle newspaper, and my editor would often assign me to come and cover events. Today, I'm speaking for others to also listen and to share their thoughts. So it's important. It's also an honor to be sharing the same panel with Mr. Manu, who is obviously a colossus in this matter and really a practitioner. I was happy to serve with him on the CDD working group on campaign financing, so it's happy to see him here. My presentation regarding this topic really is, as the Americans say, I am going to tell you what I am going to tell you from the beginning. So I will put campaign financing in Ghana in context, and then share some CDD Ghana's estimates from work that we did on campaign financing. I'm sure you'd like to know how much it costs to run for member of parliament or even president. And I see many more young people here. This will give you an idea about how much money you have to start saving for that. Then I'll also share some other estimates from some African countries, selected African countries. How much does it cost to run as MP in Kenya, or even Malawi, or even our big brother Nigeria? And then I will put the elements of what campaign financing should look like. I think there's some confusion about what is campaign financing and what is political finance. We'll dig into that. And then I will tee up some of the challenges that we face in this field in Ghana. And of course, hopefully end on a more reflective and more opportunities-like environment. Thank you. So when I was preparing for this, preparing the slides, I put up this question. It's supposed to be a rhetorical question to this my guy here. And I asked him whether he thinks we have campaign financing regulations or political finance regulations, or neither or both. I'm sure we won't have to spend all this time like this guy has done for the past 1 week trying to figure it out. Does anybody know if we have campaign finance regulation in Ghana? Anybody knows? Yes or no? Do we? Take a guess. It won't hurt you. Do we have campaign finance regulations? We should have it to regulate it, isn't it? The topic suggests regulating it, so the assumption is that we do have. But I will argue from a normative point that Ghana does not have a campaign financing regime. What we do have is how parties will be financed. Campaign finance is the raising and spending of money to influence a political vote. Political party financing really relates to how parties are funded and the activities they undertake, including elections and helping with referendum. So what we have, the legal framework is taken from the 1992 Constitution, Article 55, and of course, which has been really put together in a better comprehensive way in the Political Parties Act. The Political Parties Act, promulgated in 2000, takes from the Constitution. And the Political Parties Act, as the name says, it relates to how parties will be funded and organized, not how campaigns will be run. So you will see that in the Political Parties Act, there are no mention of candidates. Campaign financing relates to candidates and their spending and, the election for the period. So there's a lot of work for us to do when it comes to campaign financing. Also, as part of the legal and regulatory framework, political parties are regulated by the Electoral Commission. EMB is election management body. It regulates, it registers, it regulates the political parties. When it comes to how parties will be funded, the law provides that only citizens, only Ghanaians can provide money to political parties. Foreigners are prohibited from contributing money to political parties. There's a question as to whether when the parties go overseas to do fundraising, where you have Ghanaians who have naturalized as citizens of other nations, providing money to the parties, whether this is caught by the law or not. I'm sure Mr. Manu will provide some more information on that. So if you're a foreigner and you provide funds to a political party, you are liable to deportation under the Political Parties Act. And as I mentioned earlier on, the Political Parties Act only pertains to political parties and not candidates. So candidates are not expected to report to the Electoral Commission, for example. Candidates are not regulated. During campaign electioneering times, once a presidential candidate of a party is chosen, your financiers, those who provide the money to these candidates, the big ones who want something in return, go directly and give money to the candidate, right? In most cases, the bigger ones want something in return. So the candidates get a lot of money, whilst the parties are not getting the money. So that's a huge gap. We are front-loading some of the issues. Again, we don't have campaign financing regime because there's no defined campaign period. You will see the elements of what constitutes campaign financing when we go into detail. Front-loading some of the problems that we have in Ghana, as you know, vote buying, which is taking money or some advantage to get a vote, is rife. We've seen the incessant monetization of politics. To run for office, the costs are very high. And you see abuse of state resources. Abuse of state resources if particularly you are an incumbent, you are using state resources to further your campaign, which is not available to the others who are not in government. So for example, if you're on a campaign tour and you sleep in hotels, you have your campaign team. If they are being bankrolled by the state, they are paid for by the state, that's an abuse of resources. Some of these problems really pose existential threats to our democracy, particularly unregulated money in politics. And this is why we have to make sure that we have regulations to hold people accountable. So I'm now going to share some estimates from CDD's work. I mentioned CDD because I did some work for them in this regard. But CDD's work on this matter dates back to 2004, when the first thing it did was to find out popular opinions about support for state funding of political parties. At the time, in 2004, the results were fairly in the party's favor. A slight majority, 53%, supported state funding of parties, with 43% saying that they will not. The focus was on state funding. Then CDD moved into trying to assess how much it costs to run for election as MP. And there we see some astronomical increases from, I think, 124,000 going all the way to 233,000. This was to be followed by the study that I led for CDD Ghana. Here, the focus was trying to find out how illicit funds gets into our election. And we used that opportunity to also update the findings. The 2022 study found that to run for MP, the process of nurturing that constituency, typically it is like 2 or 3 years before you go up to the party and announce that I want to be a candidate. You spend about 2 million Ghana, and then a further 2 million Ghana for the election itself when you become MP. But the costs do not even end. For the period that the MP is in office, for the next 4 years, the paying continues. You know, school fees, all of that. And MPs typically tend not to go to their constituency as many times as they should. You will see this is reflected across African countries as well. To run for president was estimated at $100 million. We still need to do some work around there to itemize the full cost. But also, some of the challenges with the monetization is that it has an exclusionary effect on women candidates, for example, who cannot raise that kind of money to run for office. So we have limited women representation. And of course, this is fueled also by, the monetization is fueled by demand and supply, demand-driven corruption, which is the demand from the public on the MPs, on the candidates, to get money from them. The primaries that you typically hear of, monies are distributed, and it's become normalized, unfortunately. Right? It also has this effect on the members of parliament or public office holders. They get into office seriously indebted, you know. And some of them will tell you, and some of them have said it publicly, that they tend to be broke, particularly when they leave office. This is just to let you know the sources of funding. How do candidates fund their campaigns? Some of it from personal savings, some take loans, others, of course, from their friends. I'm sure on some of the WhatsApp platforms, your groups and others, some of your friends who are running for office may be coming to you for money. And then the bigger one is what we call the business financiers. Business financiers or party financiers are the big guys. Okay, these are high-level contractors. They are in it for the money. There may be an ideological support, but they would fund your campaign and then expect to get their recoup their investment with interest. How do these monies get given out? They give it to the candidates directly, if it's a party, sometimes through the party, and all of that. I have here an excerpt from some of the interviews that we did with some of the financiers that we identified. And we asked questions about why they fund these elections. And one says, I fund political party activity and candidates to, quote, build contacts and to sustain my business under every government. As a businessman, you finance the parties to stay in business under every government. This has engineered friends for me in both NDC and MPP in every part of Ghana. So I'm able to get favors everywhere. And then we asked another one, whether they got contracts from both. Say, yes, I did get contracts under all of them. But I got the most contracts under the late President John Evans Atta Mills, but not much under former President Kufuor. Aside from the benefits I get as a result of my party financing, I believe the quality of my work, duration of delivery also contributes to the reason I got many contracts under the previous government. That helps me to recoup all my investments. Okay? Then another one said, I finance candidates for president and parliament on the ticket of both the NDC and MPP to ensure I get new contracts and protect the contract I received from a previous government, if there's a change of government. So far, things have been good for me. So you see the very reasons why they finance. Another thing was a very interesting thing we found. And one of them said, as a businessman, and this was for protection of their businesses. As a businessman, you don't really have a choice. They, candidates and parties, don't force you to finance them. But once they approach you to make a demand, you don't want to take the risk of your business struggling in case they win. Once they approach you, you must find your money and give it to them. It is difficult to get contracts from a government that doesn't consider you as one of them. So your past financial support to them is what can influence them to give you contracts. You know, it's not free money. So now let's have some comparisons. How much does it cost to run as MP in some of the other African countries? In Kenya, Kenya is big. MPs in Kenya are among the highest paid MPs in the world. Base salary is about almost $10,000. With allowances and everything, the maximum comes to about $14,000 a month. This is a big deal. And they spend a ton of money to get elected. The estimates are between $196,000 to $343,000 or more. MP. Ghana, we are chicken change. It's about 80,000, 60,000. Uganda, the People's Republic of Uganda, it's about $136,000, about $137,000. You need that money to run for MP and to win it. Sometimes you don't even win it. Malawi, spending is moderate, well, 36,000, about 37,000. But Malawi is a smaller country. Yes? About 20 million people with 228 constituencies. Our neighbors, Sierra Leone, close neighbors, the range is incredibly shocking, up to 250,000 US dollars. And they have a very interesting case. You know, Sierra Leone has come from long periods of the Civil War and all of that. In one instance, the MPs say that they are not able to keep up. So they go for overdrafts every month. And every month they default. Their names are published in the newspapers. They have a place where defaulters of loans. Zambia, where I was involved in that study also, we found about $132,000. Africa is a country, our problems are very similar, if not the same. In Zambia, for example, we expect the rates to go up because Zambia, they do not hold party primaries. It's the party that selects somebody to be the candidate. So if they do party primaries, you're going to have an increase close to 200,000. So these are really serious problems that we face in Africa. Unregulated money in politics. Now, I mentioned earlier that we don't have, from a normative standpoint, we don't have campaign financing regulation, because campaign financing is raising and spending money to influence a political vote. There are elements that a campaign financing regulation should have. One of them is that there must be a defined campaigning period. In Ghana, we don't have a campaigning period. Campaigning period, every time they are campaigning. But as some of us men say, there is no campaign after election. You know what that means. Please, don't use that in your marriage or relationship, because if you don't continue to campaign, your marriage will break down. And then you should have state funding, some sort of mixture of state funding or public-private funding. You should have contribution limits or caps. Somebody contributing money, there should be. We don't have that in Ghana. Foreign donations, we have it in Ghana, they are not accepted, but that pertains to political parties. And then there should be spending limits, in a campaign finance regulation. And of course, reporting, enforcement. Abuse of state resources should also be spelled out in a campaign financing legislation. So, limited campaign period, sharing other places where you cannot see this, but if you put it on here, Nigeria, it is 90 days. Okay, Nigeria has 90 days, and it is established in law. So in Ghana, typically if you take the Electoral Commission, they approve of candidates from September. We could easily, start with a 90-day or, a 60-day thing. State funding of political parties. Most states adopt a state funding and a private funding model. Interestingly, for example, in Kenya, they have allocated 0.3% of their GDP to funding political parties. It's the law. And it is part of their campaign financing regime. Ghana, we don't have direct funding. Direct funding is money. Indirect funding is what? That the state should afford equal opportunities to parties and their presidential candidates, equal opportunity to the state-owned media. We also have some kind of direct funding when it comes to the parties and the presidential candidate. How does this work? The Electoral Commission sets up the amount of money that must be paid by the candidates. In the presidential candidate section, if you get 25% of the vote, you get your money refunded to you. Parliamentary, if you get 12.5, you get your money refunded. That's some sort of state funding, because the money goes. But this is what we call the use of the strict proportionality principle, which is that based on certain popularity of votes. But the equality principle is that type that money is given to all the political parties. A base amount is given to all parties. So the smaller parties don't suffer. And then you apply the proportional one to it as well. Namibia actually allows foreigners to fund their parties, their campaigns. But there are disclosure limits. Ghana, we don't. So this is just giving you countries in Africa where that's sort of private funding or state funding. Ghana, we don't allow state funding. So you see all of the others, there's some sort of state funding that's allowed. Okay? The other ones, blue and violet. So Ghana and Nigeria and a few other countries are the outliers. You have to provide some state funding to use it to regulate the political parties. Contribution limits or caps. Ghana, there are no contribution limits or caps because we don't even have it in the law. We don't have it in the Political Parties Act, and there is no regulation for candidates. So we don't have it. But in many places, they have contribution limits, how much an individual or a corporation can provide to a political party. And disclosure is also there, so we know who is giving the money to the candidates. Foreign donations accepted or banned. Here, Ghana does not accept foreign donations, right? Or it's banned. You have Even Chad here accepts foreign donations. Do they have a choice? But Namibia and the other countries close to South Africa all allow for foreign funding to regulate it. Spending limits, again, Ghana, no, we don't even have that in the legislation. And you see the other places where there are spending limits, and both on the party and under the candidate. We can't talk about spending limits for candidates in Ghana because candidates are not even captured by the law. Reporting mechanisms, for example, in many countries in Africa, the parties are required to report. So this is the side for parties. There's a lot of blues here. Many countries require reporting, almost every other country. But for candidates, Ghana does not. We don't even have the legislation for that. But in Nigeria, for example, that's required. In Kenya and the other places, that's required. Enforcement and sanctioning, and I have just a few slides to finish. Normally, the EMB, the election management body, like in Ghana, is the Electoral Commission that is mandated to register, regulate, and enforce the political parties' law. But Kenya has a very unique thing they've done. Kenya is always ahead of us, way ahead. Their campaign financing law is separate from the EMB. The first time they did it was 2013. So, how many years are we behind them? And they have decoupled the election job from the regulation of the political parties. In Ghana, we have it together. So Kenya has the office of the Register of Political Parties. It registers and regulates the parties, and it provides those sanctions. So this is something that we can consider. South Africa has it mixed like Ghana, but they do have other options by which they sanction. And some of the sanctioning regimes include fines, prison sentences, forfeiture, loss of public funding, and all of that. So very stringent. Challenges and prospects in Ghana, many of them I mentioned, I front-loaded some of our challenges in the beginning. For example, we don't have a campaign financing regime from a normative standpoint. What we have now, the Political Parties Act, which regulates political parties, is not fit for purpose. Monetization of politics, cost of politics on the rise. Vote buying. There's also another aspect about the laws dealing with vote buying. Vote buying is criminalized under law, but it applies to only elections, national elections and referenda. So it does not extend to intra-party elections. Though sometimes I've seen the Special Office of Special Prosecutor say that they're going to prosecute those who took money and all of that in some of the party primaries. You don't have a law. The law extends to only national elections and public referenda. So you have to amend the law if you want to include vote buying in intra-party. There's a whole lot of things that you need to happen. Abuse of state resources as well. We need to put it in the campaign financing about resources of the state that cannot be used. We have gaps in the enforcement of even the political parties' law. Prospects, on the brighter side, there's increasing awareness about how serious unregulated money, the harm that it can do to our democracy. And so we've had calls from civil society, from political parties themselves, from the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, that we must do something about it. So we have momentum on our side. And members of parliament have been crying a lot. There's a lot of instances where they've said that, no, they want this regulation, they want things to be regulated, because at the end of the day, many of them live quite broke. And it's been bipartisan. From the NDC and MPP side, all of them want money, unregulated money politics to be addressed. So that's on the brighter side. A couple of recommendations, many of which I've said at three levels. Legal and regulatory reform. We need to have campaign financing legislation. in itself. What we have is a political parties financing. We can go it both ways. We can decide to amend first the Political Parties Act, but that amendment will be substantial. But then we also have to come up with a brand new campaign financing legislation. We can put all of those together, or we can separate them as other organizations. So institutional reform, some of our institutions that are dealing with some of these issues, we may have to either expand their mandates, like the Electoral Commission, or to take the regulation of parties away from the Electoral Commission and establish a new body that will solely be responsible for registering, monitoring, and regulating parties, as well as if we decide to do public financing, how it will be regulated. In Kenya, the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties is the one that also administers the public fund, the 0.3% to the parties. And of course, we must continue to do research work and use the resource to do advocacy to ensure that we are educating the public about the harmful effects of monetization of our politics. I thank you for your attention.
We now call on the second speaker. I think you can go on with your first one and then continue with your second one, and then Nyarko will come in with the second one. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson, Emeritus Professor, distinguished Registrar of the Academy, colleague, Speaker, Mr. Nyarko. I think we have met, as you rightly said, at the CDD forum on the same subject matter, political party and campaign finance, and both of us served on a committee that was put up by the CDD. So what I'm going to say basically resonates with what he had already said. And let me say a big thank you to GAAS, Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on political party and campaign financing with this august house. Let me also mention that the invitation stipulated that I speak for not more than 10 minutes, because I have already sent a written presentation to the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences for their own in-house work, and that on this forum they are just giving me 10 minutes. But I came here and Madam decided out of her own, Madam Professor Emeritus told me out of her own generosity that he's expanding the time. But I didn't prepare for expanded time. But I love it. I love it because I love the conversation on political party finances. So, Madam, let me say a big thank you for giving me more time. This is how the presentation outline is going to look at introduction, role of money in campaign, laws regulating campaign financing, comparison with Nigeria and Kenyan law, and gaps in Ghana law, and then some recommendations. Money is an essential component of any democracy. Competing in the general elections costs money, and election campaigns are becoming more expensive as election cycles go by. Campaign financing is understood as all monetary and in-kind contributions and expenditures collected by and incurred by candidates, their political parties, or their supporters for electioneering. And this is from aceproject.com. Ace Project is an outfit from ESA, E-I-S-A, in South Africa, which is electoral sustainability project for Africa. So they gave this definition of campaign finance. And what do we use money for in campaign? We establish campaign offices. We are getting closer to the campaign season. Many political parties and candidates are coming up with their new offices where they will meet their teaming supporters, where they will have their meetings, and etc. So we need to establish campaign offices, recruit staff, train agents and candidates, undertake polling and research, get the campaign message out through various electronic means, make travel arrangements for the candidates to meet voters across the country. You go on hustings, candidates will move from region, constituency throughout the country. And you engage canvassers and volunteers to work on your behalf. You cannot be at every corner of the country. There are about currently 42,000 polling stations. And a candidate, particularly a presidential candidate, cannot go to all these polling stations. So he must have canvassers and volunteers who, on his behalf, will present his message to the voters. You must organize community meetings. You must undertake media and communication engagements. That's on radio, television, discussions, phone calls, text messaging, billboard advertisement, press event, press soiree or press conference. And you must run campaign websites, etc., etc. All these things cost money in a campaign. The cost of politics has increased astronomically in Ghana for both internal and the general elections. This phenomenon has largely affected the youth, women, and persons with disabilities' participation in politics. There's a growing concern that needs to be addressed, as many women are not capable of raising huge sums of money to compete and contest for political positions, especially in the parliamentary and presidential elections. It is believed that the cost of running presidential campaign in Ghana could reach $100 million, while that of a member of parliament is around 3 to 4 million Ghana cedis. Aspiring MPs are forced to obtain extra election campaign funds through loans, which become extremely burdensome due to the requirements for collateral and other forms of guarantee. political party funding in Ghana is governed by Political Parties 2000 Act 574. And there are various sections in the Act which deals with declaration of assets, liabilities and expenditure in relation to elections. And the first one, under Section 14 of the Act 574, is that a political party shall, within 21 days before a general election, submit to the Electoral Commission a statement of its assets and liabilities. It goes on to say that a political party shall, within 6 months after a general election or by-election in which it has participated, submit to the EC a detailed statement of all expenditure incurred for that election. The third point under that law, Section 14 of Act 574, is that a statement is required to be submitted shall be supported by a statutory declaration made by the general or national secretary of the political party and the national treasurer of that party. So these people have been named in the Act to submit the accounts, and they must support it with a statutory declaration. You cannot go and swear an oath before a commissioner of oaths or a lawyer when you yourself, you do not understand the document that you are submitting. So later we will come to realize that we are saying we must reform and educate the treasurers, the general secretaries, and the chairmen of the political parties in-house to understand certain rudiments of accounting and auditing. I give a comparative study on the gaps between Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. Ghana, our campaign period is unlimited, as you can see up there. Nigeria has 6 months, and Kenya has 6 months. Individual donation, how much can an individual donate to a campaign? In Ghana, it's unlimited. Nigeria has 1 million naira, which translates to about $653 per individual. And if you go to campaign expenditure, Ghana, we don't have any limit. So political parties and candidates can spend as much as they want if they have the money, or they can borrow. Whereas in Nigeria, a presidential candidate under their law is supposed to expend not more than 1 billion naira, which translates to $653,000 US. A governor of a state can spend under the law in Nigeria of 200 million naira, which translates to about $130,217 US. Kenya also has a limit for individual donations. In their last 2017, the previous election, the candidates were to source, or the political parties can receive up to $148.2 million, which is about 15 billion Kenyan shillings in contribution. Whereas in Ghana, we have an unlimited amount. And any single source can contribute up to $29.5 million or 3 billion Kenyan shillings. And the Kenyan system is that the IEBC, which is the election management body, has to make the proposal to Parliament for it to be accepted before becoming the law. And the law says 1 year to elections, the the electoral management body, that is the IEBC of Kenya, must make the proposals to Parliament. So in their last election of 2022, in which President Ruto won, the IEBC could not send the proposals to Parliament before 1 year limitation. So Parliament rejected it, that the time frame has elapsed. And so they had to use the 2017 standards. Actually, the Kenyan lawmakers wanted more room for more money, but the IEBC did not send that amount. So they used the time frame to reject the amounts that have been proposed by the election management body, EMB. In the written document, we have shown much about the United States funding and the regulations governing it, which is much more stricter compared to Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. And I think that if we go through that, there are certain lessons that can be learned. And what is important is our ability to reform some parts of our democracy, which we think are archaic or beyond what we can reach, or to make our democracy open to the entire citizen. If you spend so much money, you are debarring some of your qualified citizenry who, because of money, cannot compete in elections. And that should not be the case. But I have heard on various platforms for the last maybe 20 years or so, oh, there is a need for a reform. Then we put it on the back burner. Then when elections are approaching, we bring it to the front burner. We talk about it. We never act or reform the system. I think this is something that as a country, we must be bold. And things that are not going well for us, which are going to stifle our democracy, we must put a stop to it and reform and make changes as when it is necessary. That is now. Recommendations. Reforms, there should be reforms in the law. There should be limits to donations and campaign expenditure. I mean, these are limited amounts of money that people can donate or candidates and political parties can expend. It's not the right way to go. The Political Parties Act 2000 at 574 needs a complete reform to, among other things, examine the possibilities of certain contributions and expenditure limits. Expenditure limits should apply to both political parties and their parliamentary and presidential candidates. In order to be operative, restrictions on campaign expenditure should also clearly identify what counts as election expenditure and what does not, and should clearly distinguish between campaign and non-campaign expenditure or campaign spending. I think in this country we used to say that the next election begins after the end of the last election. How can you campaign for 4 years? Do you have the wherewithal, which is money, to do that kind of work? So there must be time frame for campaigns, because as far as I know, we have pre-election, election, and post-election campaigns. So the election campaign basically must start with when the Electoral Commission receives your nomination and approves of the nomination. As we are speaking now, parties have gone through primaries and have elected their candidates. But the candidates have not been approved by the Electoral Commission. So they can't call themselves candidates. I mean, we live in this country where we have seen some candidates present their nominations to the Electoral Commission and they are rejected. And the matter will end up in the courts. Either the Supreme Court will come in or the High Court will come in even if they have won the elections, as happened at the Asin North constituency recently. So if the Electoral Commission has not approved your candidature, you may win your party's parliamentary primaries or presidential primaries. You are not a candidate. So for me, the day that the Electoral Commission will approve your nomination, in the current circumstances, that's September 19th, that's when you become a candidate. So that's when you can call your campaign. But that is not the case. And I think this is an area we have to look at, because we can't spend 4 years in campaigning. And I'm happy that a group like the Ghana Bar Association has made this call, that our campaign periods are too long and we should shorten it. In fact, in Nigeria, it's 6 months. In Kenya, it's 6 months. In Ghana, if I may say, 4 years. Strict enforcement of reporting of statement of account. The EC should take seriously the establishment of an enforcement unit, which should include a legal advisory support to enforce laws regarding the conditions for maintaining a registered political party and accounting for political party campaign finances. This is what Mr. Nyarko rightly said and referred to the Kenya example, where they have registrar of political parties. And Sierra Leone too has it. And I know that NPP made a recommendation to the EC maybe 10 years ago that Ghana must have an authority to supervise the work of political parties as is done in Kenya, because the Electoral Commission is overburdened. Supervising elections is no joke. So if you give them the additional responsibility of overseeing political party accounts, etc., you are overburdening them, and they barely will take a serious view of that aspect of their work. Internal training of national, regional, and constituency treasurers. Internally, political parties must periodically train and educate their national chairman, national treasurer, and general secretary on political party financing to be able to fulfill the provisions of Section 14(3) of the Political Parties Act, which states that a statement required to be submitted under this section shall be supported by a statutory declaration made by the general or national secretary of the political party and the national treasurer of that party. And you cannot make a statutory declaration if you don't have adequate training and an in-depth understanding on the subject matter. You must have an in-depth understanding of the subject matter. And on this, I'm happy to say that the MPP last 2 weeks or so had a training session for the chairman, the treasurer, the general secretary, and other officers on campaign finances. And CDD did a presentation there on behalf of their organization, which was well accepted. So these recommendations are what we would want to see done to bring some form of clarity and monetization in our campaigns, party organization, and elections. And by so doing, we will be able to stabilize our democracy and not to fall into a pit or a hole. That is what I am recommending to be done in this country. I will move on straight away as Professor Emeritus moderator requested, to solvency of political parties and candidates, making political parties making political parties. Where's that? I can't see this. Okay. Okay, I think I have it here, but I don't have it on the screen. Patrick, where do you have it? Making political parties solvent, issues and opportunities. Yeah, thank you. The presentation will look at functions of political parties, sources of revenue of political parties, laws regulating political parties, issues and opportunities. And that's the same thing. Political parties, as we all know, play an important function in the formation of the executive and legislative arms of government by recruiting, preparing, and fielding candidates for the various political offices created under the 1992 Constitution. Under the Political Parties Act 2000, Act 574, political parties are required to have and maintain party offices in all regions and at least 2/3 of the districts in the country. This is in Section 9C of Act 574. The new Patriotic Party has offices at the national, regional, and constituency levels. At all these levels, the party has elected officers, permanent and temporary administrative staff who operate these offices. Political parties hold such assets as buildings, vehicles, office equipment, and machinery. More importantly, the party conducts national campaigns to compete in the general elections. Where do the parties get their revenues from? The sources are fundraising, donation, and others, and the largest chunk comes from membership dues. The others may consist of contributions, sale of nomination forms, filing fees, and sale of party paraphernalia. Solvency, the ability of a company to meet its long-term debts and financial obligations. This from Investopedia. It demonstrates a political party's ability to manage and pay for the cost of its operations into the foreseeable future. And if they are solvent, then they must be able to pay for the cost of its operations into the foreseeable future. And to be able to do this, or to stay solvent, they must develop annual budgets with approval from the National Executive Committee or the National Council and abide by it. Between 1992 to 2004, some political parties in Ghana, which were in existence, folded up, partly because they were unable to remain solvent. Act 574, Section 4, Clause 3, political parties and corporate bodies may sue and be sued in its corporate name. So if political parties come and hire people's building, houses, or rent a car and they cannot pay for it, they can be sued. And this has happened several times, and it has collapsed the many political parties between 1992 to 2004. People think that political parties have a lot of money, but that's not the case. They owe a lot as well. These are some of the political parties whose registration certificates were cancelled because some of them were not solvent. That is, they were not able to pay for their debts, and it ended up in courts. So in Section 31 of the Political Parties Act, it says that on an application made by the commission, that is the Electoral Commission, the High Court may make such orders as appears to the court, just and equitable, for the winding up and dissolution and disposition of the property, assets, rights, and liabilities of a political party whose registration has been cancelled. So the moment the Electoral Commission cancels your registration, you are bound to suffer if you owe people and you haven't paid. But there are laws on political party contribution. I think we have said that, and this is in the Constitution of the country, Article 55, which says that only a citizen of Ghana may make a contribution or a donation to a political party. Contribution from non-citizens to political campaign in Ghana is prohibited. You have to declare the assets and expenditure of the political party. That is in Section 13 of Act 574. That 90 days after the issue of the final certificate. I have heard in the news some new political parties being given final or some certificates from the Electoral Commission. And they must know that within 90 days after the issue of the final certificate, the law says that they must have a written declaration and details of all assets and expenditure, including contributions or donations in cash or in kind made to the initial assets of the political party. And they are to submit under Section 21 state of its accounts, the sources of its funds, membership dues paid, contributions or donations in cash or in kind, properties of the party and the time of acquisition, and audited accounts for the party for the year. Section 23 also demands that only citizens of Ghana may contribute cash or in kind, and a firm or a partnership or enterprise owned by citizens with at least 75% owned by a Ghanaian ownership can also contribute. Now the issues, the influx of foreign contribution, the laws, and indeed many other countries, including those considered in this paper, strongly bar monetary contribution from non-citizens, from governments, and from foreign corporations. Inability to strictly apply sanctions. Private business support for political parties and politicians in Ghana, although legal, is often kept secret. The penalties stipulated in Constitution to deal with violations in Section 24 of Act 574 are clearly spelled out in Section 25.1 and 25.2. However, when it comes to the issue of compliance with enforcement Section 25.1 and 25.2, unfortunately, there are no existing mechanism to verify the income streams of political parties and the patrons making such donations. 3, there is no direct public funding system for political parties, and the law does not expressly prohibit the use of public funds for party activities. The law is silent on the use of public funds or resources by government officials for party financing. I think that Mr. Nyarko spoke about that, on how incumbency can use state funds for their campaigns. Now, Africa, Ghana and most African countries relatively are cash-dependent economies, and the transactions are in cash. This reliance negatively affects the economy as a whole and makes it more difficult to monitor the role of money in politics. The limited penetration of the banking system in many African countries makes the effective oversight of financial activities more difficult. Cash transactions are more difficult to track than bank transfers, and low levels of tax payment compliance means that much of the funding of political parties and election campaigns leave no paper trail. Section 21(1), inability of parties to make full disclosure and lack of systems for verification, lays down comprehensive rules of financial reporting for all political parties. These accounts must give full details of the source of the party's funds, membership dues paid, contribution in cash or in kind, properties owned by the party, and when they were acquired. The question here is, how are the Electoral Commission, the electoral management bodies, and other related agencies able to verify what the political parties present to them as full details of their account? There is a lacuna there. Opportunities, the use of technology. Technology has changed the face of politics globally. Parties must harness the potential of technology in the payment of dues, for instance. In the MPP, for instance, the party has moved from the practice of members having to walk to the various constituency offices to pay in cash. Electronic payment platforms such as mobile money and bank transfers have been introduced as a means of paying dues and making contributions. That this approach will enable EC track the amount of monies received as dues, donations, and contributions, and cross-reference it with the statement of accounts presented for disclosure at the end of the year. Reform in the existing laws. As discussed earlier in part 1, there is the need to revisit the Political Parties Act 574 for major reforms. As political parties are being entreated to make collection of donations and contributions electronic, the EC and other agencies will be able to track the movement of money in the political space. Limits must be placed on how much individuals and corporations can donate or contribute in a year. There must be limits. If you look at Nigeria and Kenya and the United States, they all have limits. Why is Ghana unlimited? The law also needs to be clear on the use of illicit funds for funding political parties and prescribe stringent sanctions for perpetrators. To ensure transparency, Clause 2 of Section 21, we demand that payments of fees to be determined by the EC to inspect or obtain copies of returns and audited accounts of political parties filed with the EC should be amended or removed. I mean, if you want to have a look at political parties' accounts, audited accounts, and you go to the Electoral Commission, you will be asked to pay some fees. Why? I don't understand. That will prevent people from going to find out about how either their own political parties' accounts are being run or audited, or if journalists want to know anything about the party, they have to go to the Electoral Commission and pay some fees. I think strongly that these fines, as in the Political Parties Act 2000, Act 574, should be removed. The prospects of public funding for political parties. There's no provision under the current law for direct public funding of political parties. But under a long-standing arrangement, members of parliament receive a portion of the district assembly's common fund allocated to the district within their constituencies for various uses. And the uses may be political, school fees, etc. They all have political undertones. So we have to take a second look at that. However, from 1996 to 2004 elections, the government, through the Electoral Commission, provided vehicles to presidential candidates for campaign purposes. And I remember I collected some of those cars when I was the chairman of the party. MPP was giving 10 NIVAC trucks for campaign purposes from the government. The member of parliament also contribute to their political parties. Yes, both in MPP and NDC, the caucuses in the parliament pay some amounts of money from their salaries and donate it for party work. That is also state funding because the monies are from the consolidated fund and they use part of it to pay for party work. The draft bill on public funding of political parties in 2008, which was proposed by the Institute of Economic Affairs and the Ghana Political Parties Program, IEA GPPP. The bill received approval from political parties. However, the bill was never discussed at cabinet meeting or debated in Parliament of Ghana. As a country, we can make a conscious effort to revisit the bill and make adjustments to sponsor it again. A shift in monetization of our politics. As presented in part 1, the cost of politics has increased. At the rate of current phenomenon of monetization of elections and our democracy, we stand to lose out because of the debt overhang that is befalling on aspiring candidates and parties. Candidates and parties are being drowned in debt upon debt. And if you speak to MPs and candidates, they will tell you they owe a lot because of campaign and how they are financing the campaign. We have to find a way of stopping this monetization of our politics in Ghana. Otherwise, our democracy stands to fall. The monetization of our elections is becoming increasingly alarming. Hence, they need to hit the brakes on it in order to stabilize our democracy and grow it for the full participation. All Ghanaians should be able to participate in our democracy, but for the monetization. So we should eliminate monetization. Some have suggested increasing number of delegates to cover registered members of political parties. But in my personal opinion, I believe that proportional representation system must be looked at going forward. This will help reduce the level of corruption in internal and general elections and stabilize our democracy for it to grow. Democracy is not for sale. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Mr. Nyarko give his 10-minute talk on the second topic, making political parties solvent issues and opportunities. Then we can open up for discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Manu. He has made my work so easy. I'm tempted to say that this is the end of my presentation because he said it all. But I'll also add up to a couple of things, focusing on some ideas which political parties can consider to make their parties even more solvent. So again, as an outline, I would recall the political, legal, and regulatory framework surrounding political parties, a lot of which today you've heard Political Parties Act. I was, thinking about it in my mind that somebody might leave here using it as the nickname, Political Parties Act, right? Then I'll share some findings from CDD Ghana's work on the sources of funding of political parties based on work that's done. I think Mr. Manu has said quite a lot about it. I will then project the issues, adding up to what Mr. Manu has said, and also share some prospects. So I go back to times when I wasn't born and times that I think many of us weren't born, looking at the first, second, and third republics. How were parties funding their campaigns? How were parties providing money for it? This is a travel history of Ghana from when we got independence. You will see also the number of political parties. Interestingly, since the Fourth Republic began, which was 1993, we've seen an exponential increase in the number of political parties. You would see from the first, second, and third republics some ebbs and flows. Political parties are a lot, then they go down. Part of it is also accounted for by the military regimes, the stampede the democracy, and then political parties, some of them will be banned, and some will have to start all over again. But since the Fourth Republic, political parties have existed in a very steady. I think the latest figures is about 23 or so parties now. So it's interesting. How were political parties funded in the past? CPP members, of course, they paid 2 shillings. 2 shillings in current Ghana currency will be how much? Let's do the math. It will be a lot, right? I mean, I'm sure older people here will relate to it. £5 was levied on a load of cocoa on devoted members of the LLM and then the UP. You know, like they would sell cocoa. If you sold cocoa, you would pay money on it as subscription fees. Another interesting thing, in addition to what we've been seeing happening, is that they would have football matches, for example. So imagine the MPP, NDC, and all the other parties having a gala at the Accra Sports Stadium or Kumasi Sports Stadium, and you have the flag bearers, Baumia and Mahama and Cheddar, all of them playing, featuring, to raise money. They would do that to raise money. We don't do it now, but some ideas too. We've talked about what the framework is for financing parties. I think we've mentioned the Political Parties Act, where only citizens can make donations. Corporate bodies owned 75% by Ghanaians would be able to do that. We've talked about the prohibitions against non-citizens providing funding, so I'm not going to talk about that. And the penalties that evolve from it, you're liable to be deported. But in practice, as we've heard Mr. Manu say, the parties get money from foreigners as well. It's not regulated. This is the reason we have to have a amendment to the Political Parties Act and also have campaign financing legislation. Other African countries allow for foreigners to fund their parties in elections. Namibia, for example. But the requirement is disclosure. So the laws are strict. A foreigner can provide funds, but the political party must disclose. And the disclosure is on 2 fronts. The person who is giving the money discloses it, sometimes in a tax filing. And the recipient, which is the political party or the candidate, also has to disclose. So it helps to. Sources of funding. Mr. Manu talked about this, the requirements to report to the Electoral Commission, the audited accounts, and all of that. I'm not going to let that detain us. Since sanctions regime, we also have sanctions. What should happen? A political party that fails to comply could have its registration revoked. The EC, in practice, what has the EC been doing? And this is a statement attributed to Dr. Kweku when he said that by assessment, I wouldn't want to put the number of political parties that should exist, but 90% of them should have been cancelled. I mean, their registration to be cancelled because they are not in compliance. The parties are not fulfilling their obligations. The last reports that I got, surprisingly, and in a good manner, had about 13 parties that had actually submitted their accounts. So they are doing well for now. So how are parties funded? And we looked at parties versus candidates. Mr. Manu mentioned membership dues as one of them. Within the political party spectrum, from PNP, PNC and all that, NDC, MPP, the membership dues are small, between 1 to 5 Ghana a month. So imagine. But of course, if people are paying, they will aggregate. Donations for party interest. There is the mention of using electronic means, such as paying by mobile money and all of that. Then, of course, the monetary donations like vehicles, items of value, and all of that. MPs also pay money. Part of the money they receive, they are required to do so. I think Mr. Manu has mentioned this. So I'll move on to issues. First of all, as we've mentioned, there is no direct funding of political parties. What we have is the indirect, which is media access provided for by the Constitution, that all of them are giving political parties and the candidates are giving free airtime to present their programs to the public. So obviously also, if you look at the architecture of political parties, required to have about offices in about 2/3 in the districts and all of that, it costs money. Mr. Manu has mentioned that it costs money, you have to pay ECG, which you hardly get these days. Well, things have stabilized a bit. And so you look at the cost of operations and the money that comes in, and you see that really there are gaps that need to be filled. And one other thing, the lack of direct funding, which is cash contributions to political parties, is linked to lack of public support. Public support for funding of political parties really is on the low side. If you ask the Ghanaian, should political parties be giving money from the state to run, many people will say no. But the issue is beyond just that we are giving money. The state has an interest in ensuring that political parties are solvent. Because as Mr. Manu mentioned, political parties are government in waiting. They fail the executive, they fail the legislature, and all other appointments. And it's scary now because what you see from the CDD Ghana study in 2004, public support for direct funding was a bit up. 53% were in support of it, and 43% were opposed. Down to 2022, Afrobarometer CDD study shows surprisingly low numbers of support for public funding. In fact, they were asked whether they would support government providing funding to political parties. 67%, 67.2% were opposed to the idea of funding political parties. Notice that in 2004, it was 53% support for. It has dropped to 26.7%. It's a huge drop. So you have majority of Ghanaians, more than half, majority, about 2/3 of Ghanaians saying that no, we will not give money to political parties. All right? And then again, a question was asked whether if we decided to give money to political parties, whether you are willing to pay e-levy as a special tax to support it. It was also a resounding no. We will not pay additional tax or a special levy to fund political parties. Remember that in Kenya, they have in law 0.3% of their GDP is the law given to political parties. But part of the issues we have with the lack of support for political parties, state funding, is that the political parties, in my view, need to do more for the public to buy into this. Okay? Political parties need to engage with the public about the role that they play, the important role they play in our democracy. That we need strong and solvent political parties so they can hold governments accountable, especially when they are in opposition. In fact, in the UK, for example, opposition parties are giving what we call short money which is a base money given to the opposition parties so they can hold government accountable. Uganda had some of these challenges a while back, and they use the transparency options, which is engaging the public about what Mr. Manu would tell you is the cost of running, political office in all the 2/3 of the districts in Ghana. Imagine the cost associated with having employees, some of whom you pay, others who are volunteers, for example. So the political party need to bring this information and data up and center to us and engage the public so that it's not that idealized view that political parties are really doing that well and that it's a hunky-dory party that happens. So I hit on the opportunities. I think the medium to long term, political parties should be seen to be transparent and accountable to the public. We know under the Political Parties Act that they are required to report to the Electoral Commission. The Constitution is very clear about the accountability of political parties, that political parties are to publish their accounts to the public. But when the Political Parties Act, it's a lower law, was made, they put in the requirements that to get the audited accounts, for example, of political parties, you need to go to the Electoral Commission and pay a fee. In many jurisdictions, the accounts of political parties are published, one, on the Electoral Commission website, and two, the parties themselves. In places where the state funds political parties, such as in Kenya, so it's a carrot and stick that they use. The political parties are audited by the Office of the Auditor General. In the US, for example, the Federal Election Commission, when they receive the audited accounts or statements from candidates or parties, they are required by law to publish it within 48 hours on their website. So Ghana is opaque. There's a lot of opacity with this. And political parties can, collaborate with, like-minded organizations which are non-state actors to help them with this agenda of engaging with the public, letting the public know how much it takes really to run an office in a month, for example, and the fact that they need financing in order to make this happen. State will have to fund political parties. We cannot have this situation and expect that the political parties in our democracy will continue to be as vibrant as it should be. There is some form of state funding that we have to think of. In some places, there is what we call the equality principle. When the state allocates money, it shares it baseline to all political parties. That is the equality principle. And then there is a proportionality principle, which uses a combination of things. You use it to direct policy. So, for example, you can earmark a certain percentage of the money to ensure that parties include women. Parties include persons who are differently able. Parties include the youth in order to get that kind of funding. So you can do a combination of the equality, which provides funds to all the parties, and then you top it up with the proportionality principle, you balance it. Right now, if you take the 25% that presidential candidates who get 25% of the total valid vote cast, they get their money refunded to them. It's only the NDC and NPP who benefit from it. The political parties, they don't even get. The last election or so, boom, was the one that got, 3%. So you have to have a base. Once they are registered and are regulated and are in good standing, that direct support goes to all the political parties. And then you do the mix match of the proportional funding. Kenya, I think they took their name from us, Kenya, because they are doing a lot of things very well. You know, the 0.3% that they allocate to the political parties in the political funding regime, they don't just share it to the parties. They have those provisions. If you're a political party and you have more than 2/3 of your members being one gender, if it's male, you won't get some. You won't get the 75% that's allocated. So there are important things you can do with state funding of political parties. You know, policy directives that you can issue. You know, when parties do not meet the requirements, you take away the funding that you give to them and all of that. So it's not just that we are giving political parties free money. There are important things that we can do to regulate them. We expect political parties to lead in the advocacy, or if we think that leading the advocacy would be, public would think is self-interest, you know, we're all available to help, NGOs and all of that, because this is not just about them. This is about us. This is about the solvency of our democracy, you know. And then this is what I label unpopular opinion, which is that we should have in our legislation that contributions that are made must be tax deductible. It's an unpopular opinion because typically, political party, when you make a donation to a political party, the idea is that you are trying to influence a vote, and therefore we should not give you, you know, you shouldn't allow you to deduct those in taxes. But we can consider that as part of state funding. So if I earn 100,000 Ghana a year and I donate 5,000 Ghana, you know, my income has been reduced by 5,000. So when I'm filing my taxes, if my tax obligation is 10,000, my tax obligation will now be reduced to 5,000. It's a form of funding political parties. And some countries are really been doing it. Corporate donations. Our law, Political Parties Act, allows for corporate organizations to provide funding. But if 75% of it is owned by Ghanaians, all right? I think companies formed in Ghana, operating in Ghana, we should allow that they should provide funding. Kenya just amended their campaign financing regime, and they allow companies to make donations to the funding of political parties. The thing is, there must be what? Limits and disclosure as well. And Ghana will not be alone. I mean, we would just join countries with no ban on corporate donations. No ban. See, these ones, they are doing well. All right? So, Ghana really, right here, you know, we are not doing well. We have to join these people. Let the corporate organizations make donations. The thing about corporate donations is that in the law, we must have that separation. State-owned enterprises or companies that the state has a stake in will be prohibited from providing funds. Right? You often hear that one company, state-owned, has gone to donate this, you know, has done something for a person that is attributable to because of a political connection. But those prohibitions will be there in law against that. Again, you know, increase mobilization of your membership base. young ones, for example, the party should consider having periodic recruitment exercises for particularly the younger generation. You get the younger ones up on the street with NDC or MPP or whatever party. So we are recruiting people, they mount office, they mount tables and all of that with music. Gen Z, you know, you have to, when you do something, you have to add some music and some social media things for them. Use them, TikTok, you know. And of course, it cannot be overemphasized that parties need to balance, always look at their overheads, which ones that makes them efficient and which ones that they have to let go. Advocate reduction in cost drivers, operational costs. For example, you know, we have the constitutional requirement that the parties should have offices in at least 2/3 of the district. I mean, in this non-brick and mortar age, an office should not just be, you know, a building. You know, an office can even exist virtually. So you have to have a balance of a combination of, you know, on-ground offices and, you know, virtual offices. And this will require an amendment of the law. And that is why we say the Political Parties Act was made in 2000. Well, it's lived for some time. But for what, more than 20 years or so, we haven't touched it. And it's really not fit for purpose. So these are some of the considerations, along with, obviously, campaign financing regime. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for our speakers, and I'd like us all to give them a round of applause. They came in thinking of one format, and we gave them a creative new format, which they had attempted to adapt to very, very well. And we really thank you very much for two delightful, interrogative, thought-provoking lectures. Thank you so much. Another round of applause. So we started late, but I think there's time to just do one round of questions because I'm sure our young people are dying to ask some very pertinent questions. When you want to ask the question, your name and where you're coming from, and we have two topics. So generally it's financing elections. The two topics are regulating campaign financing for national elections, and the second one is making political parties solvent issues and opportunities. So you identify the topic and the speaker that you're addressing your question to in one round of maybe about 5 questions then. So we can get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. McMahon, I think the question goes to you, please. Yes, so we've looked at you talk about a very important role the political parties play in our democratic dispensation in the country. But here still, we know how the perception Ghanaians have about political parties in Ghana. For example, they think that political parties are just there to win power. When they get the power, then they use the state resources to distribute among themselves, to get themselves rich and all that. So in that case, how can you change that perception Ghanaians have about political parties? So when we are calling for state funding so that they will remain solvent and then contribute to our democratic dispensation in the country, how do you think that can be achieved? Thank you.
Please, if you have a question, Raise your hand and let me pass the mic to you.
Good evening. My name is Bless, a level 400 political science student from University of Ghana. So my question is directed to Mr. Manu. In your submission, you highlighted, in the first lecture, you highlighted that the Act of Political Parties Act 574 makes, clear that non-state actors or non-citizens should not finance campaigning. My question is there a loophole to that whereby, let's say I am a non-citizen, is there a loophole such that I can finance a political party without, in one way or another, without the state kind of catching me?
Good evening. My name is Foster Shati. My question is, we just learned that political parties there's no constitutional provision that asks them to declare their source of funding. And we also learned that foreigners cannot fund political parties. So what I'm saying is, right now we've learned about it, but then how do we curtail this? Because if our constitution does not directly state these things, then it means there are loopholes. Well, let's say if I'm a foreigner, I can still find a way to fund a political party. And since they do not have to declare their source of funding, it would never be known. And with this, foreigners can influence our elections, which is not in a positive light. Thank you.
Manu from University of Ghana. I want to ask the panel that what has been the main obstacle that has prevented us from making amendments in the constitution that will regulate these political parties, since it has been a problem over the years?
Thank you very much. Good evening. I've got two questions. The first one, the nature of the first topic, the focus was on national elections, and I would be grateful to receive some clarification because I missed it in the presentations, whether you were referring to parliamentary elections or presidential elections. What I do know is that the district level elections is also organized nationwide. Do you conceive that as national elections? My second question is on the second topic, also to both speakers. There's a certain perception that our elections are heavily influenced by external financial flows, either from Nigeria. Now we even hear about other natural resource-rich countries like DRC, Madagascar, Botswana, or some of these rich countries in Eastern Africa. Is it really something that we should be worried about, given the fact that there is foreign capital or new capital that may have serious interest in how our natural resources are governed and how local policies are actually formulated and implemented? And my worry is that some of these foreign capital may end up depriving us of our independence, may have serious consequences on the ownership of our policies, and also the infiltration of foreign interest. Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Emerita, the first question relates to how state-owned companies should not contribute to campaign finance. I think we dealt with that. Perception of political parties to change. Political parties are very important in a democratic dispensation. As I said earlier, they organize, campaign, get elected on their manifestos, and implement those things, those manifestos, for the well-being of the country. And mind you, it is only a certain threshold that will give you the power. In this country, it is 50% plus one. So if you get the majority as a political party, then the message that you sold out to the electorate in the form of a manifesto is what you must work with. But many a time, the voters will say they have not achieved what they said they would do in their manifesto. That is why we have a cycle of 4 years. At the end of the 4 years, you are supposed to account for what you have done so far to merit either giving you another chance or punishing you for not executing what you promised or the manifesto. So the idea that political parties, in fact, we must also distinguish between a political party and government. Your party may be in power, but that does not mean that everything is at your beck and call. No. You are a political party, an organization that is supposed to educate, that is supposed to train, that is supposed to mentor the youth, etc., for future leadership. So we do training, we do all manner of internal organizations. In fact, we do all kinds of things. We do public cleaning exercises. We do other forms of education. So if that does not come out and play in the minds of the public, but they always think that political parties have money. And I think I said here today that if you go into the accounts of political parties and you know the kind of debt that they owe, then this question of solvency will come to play. Because the sources of their funding, donations, membership dues, etc., if it's not coming, you will collapse because you have bills to pay. Do you think that if you are a political party, you don't pay electricity bills? Do you think that if you're a political party, you don't pay, or a candidate, you don't pay for fuel that you buy or telephone services? So that mentality is erroneous, and I agree with you that we must find a way of educating Ghanaians to change their perception of what political parties are. And the moment you put political parties out, it's going to tell whether they accounted for what they said they were going to do. And surprisingly, in this country, we have two major political parties. So we will put them on scale and look at who can do better. But we must never make the mistake of what Burkina Faso, Mali, and others are doing now, where they are banning political parties and military dictatorship is on the rise. No. Whatever it is. And I think we have gone through that stages earlier in our 60s and 70s. So we must change, the citizenry must change, the political parties must change, government must continue and do its best for the country. That's what I can say on that question. Financing without the state and then how they will catch you. That's why I recommended that, one, the audited accounts that political parties submit to the Electoral Commission, if one wants to view it, the Electoral Commission will prescribe a fee before they will give it out to you. I think that's unfair, because political parties are public institutions and the public must have access to their accounts. So for me, what is in the Political Parties Act 2000 Act 547, that says that you must pay some fees to the Electoral Commission before they give you the audited accounts of political parties. We must reform that section of the law and make it free for people to have access and look at what accounts, audited accounts that the political parties submitted. And then I have also said that individuals who contribute, the veil must be lifted so that we know who they are and the amount that they contributed. Because in this country, you just state the funds, but you don't state the total amount and who gave you that amount. I think that part of the law too must change. But increasingly, as we are using technology, mobile money, transfers, it is becoming easier to track those who have contributed to political party funding or campaigns. Yes, foreigners foster. Foreigners can influence our elections. But that is why we have in the law that bars foreigners from paying any sum of money to campaigns. I think that's a good one. That's a laudable one. The United States has it. Nigeria has it. Kenya has it. And Ghana, we have it. Because equally, we say foreigners cannot vote. So if they cannot vote, they cannot go through the back door and pay monies to influence the vote. We want the citizenry to take possession of who their leaders should be. And that can only be done when citizens take possession of contributions to campaigns and to candidates. So, first, foreigners cannot influence our elections. If they do, according to the according to the 2000 Act 574, if they are caught, the penalties are that you can be banned from coming to Ghana, or if you are in Ghana, you will be repatriated. So I think that aspect of the law is quite clear and severe. And it's good that we don't allow foreigners. When we have our independence, we should not allow foreigners to interfere. But these days, if you don't take care, there are other forms of interferences. That is through the social media and technology. Because it has happened in a giant state like the United States during Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, and Trump. The Russians were able to influence them under the auspices of Facebook. So we must be careful on social media where it comes from and who is sending messages to twist the minds of the Ghanaian electorate. What we call gaslighting. They will change your mind in a surreptitious manner and you won't be able to tell. So we should not allow ourselves to be gaslighted by social media folks. The next question was about regulating political parties over the years. Yeah, I think we live in a dynamic society, so things are bound to change from time to time. No wonder that the Electoral Commission, the various regulations that they use for voter registration, for election laws, are changed every now and then. When in 1992 the ban on politics was lifted, the Electoral Commission had CI 12, Constitutional Instrument 12. Today, we have CI 127 as the governing act for elections. So there has been several changes. In 2016, there was CI 94. Changes were made to that, and we had CI 127. We have CI 91 to govern voter registration. Before that, there were other CI. So as for regulating political parties and elections, it's a continuous action because we don't live in a static society. We live in a dynamic one, and the rules of the game are bound to change. That's what has been happening. Yes, the act, and we've been talking about national elections. I think that is different from district assembly elections. And in any case, district assembly elections are non-partisan. So we cannot include that when we are talking about national elections. So national elections in Ghana essentially is parliamentary and presidential. But if you go to Nigeria, national elections are state, that is governors, gubernatorial, parliamentary, senate, because in their house they have two houses of assembly, and then presidential. If you go to Kenya, there are 6, they call it 6 elections in one. They have municipal, which is partisan, municipal and district, which is partisan. The one we in Ghana say, we will not allow politics to creep in. But we do it in politics anyway. That's another subject matter, which maybe in future, the Ghana Academy of Science will consider. But they have that. They have county assemblies. They have governors elections. They have presidential, and they have parliament. So they do 6 elections in a day. In Ghana, we do 2 for our general elections. So that makes the difference. And as for external financial inflow, if you are caught, whether you are from DRC or Madagascar or Nigeria, the law will deal with you sternly. Thank you.
No, I think Mr. Manu answered all the questions. Please direct all the difficult questions to him so we can answer.
Well, thank you very much for our 2 speakers, Mr. Nyarko and Mr. Manu. You've really done us proud this evening, and we thank you very much for an engaging evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emerita Kwachi, for ably chairing this evening's session, especially with all the modifications that had to be made to the program. Tomorrow, we have the last day of this year's Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences Public Forum, and it will be on the topic, the inclusion of women in national elections. The inclusion of women in national elections. I can't wait to listen to, and we have 2 formidable female speakers to speak on this topic. I look forward to hearing what they have to say. So join us tomorrow here in this auditorium at 5:30 p.m. for the last day. It promises to be very exciting. I would like to thank our audience. The president is here. Vice President for the Arts is here. Some notable fellows are here. I would like to thank you all for your presence here this evening. Let me thank our invited guests, especially the political party members who have come to support our two speakers. I'd like to thank the students who, again, have made our session very interesting with all the questions that they have asked. Another engaging session. Thank you very much. Lest I forget, our online participants, thank you for joining us this evening. There will be packed refreshment right outside the auditorium. So please refresh yourself before you leave. Thank you. Now, please stand while I escort the chairperson and the speakers out of the auditorium. Thank you very much.